huge news, Herc, out of Mexico. According to reports, Diego Cocca is set to replace Tata Martino as Mexico's national team manager. The 50-year-old Argentine was in charge of Tigres. He took over there just as recently as November. But he's best known for taking Atlas to back-to-back titles a couple years ago, ending a 70-year title drought. Cocca winning out for this job over candidates like Miguel Herrera, Guillermo Almada, Marcelo Bielsa, Nacho Ambriz, Turco Mohamed, just to name a few. Tigres have confirmed the move with this statement, also relieving Cocca of his duties as their head coach. The Mexican Federation, from them, an announcement is expected imminently, certainly by the end of the week. Herc, what do you think? Is Diego Cocca the right hire for El Tri?
No, certainly not from a stylistic standpoint. Now, I remember this exercise we did with the coaches and the possibles, the safeties, the reach, the dream, all that stuff. You went pragmatic, and you wanted pragmatic. Well, here you go. This is as pragmatic as it gets. Yeah, it was successful with Atlas, but Atlas was a team, and Diego Cocca in his DNA is a coach who has no problem with sitting back. He would literally put 10 players behind the ball. It's a defend-first mentality, prioritizes the defensive work rate, and then attacks from there. At Atlas, he was very successful in the way he defended. You could see that first in clean sheets. But in the way they attacked with 2-3 players tops, and those 2 players were very special. A Julio Furch, who was physically gifted and just bodied and bossed people around, and a Julian Quiñones that was playing on another level. But what you get out of him is defensive structure, and I would say about that, just that defensive structure. Now, if you had a problem with Tata Martino and his defensive play against Argentina, se murieron de nada. They didn't die on their shit. They didn't do anything. They died playing a way that they've never played. Well, get used to it, because Diego Cocca plays that way. Let's absorb. Let's counter. Let's hit them vertically if we can. But if we can't, we're maintaining a 0.
Look, there are a lot of red flags here, Herc, but to your point, the one you raised about his style is, to me, not at all a red flag. That's the one box that he checks for me, is that he is pragmatic, and I think that's what Mexico needs to do at the international level, certainly at the World Cup level, like we saw from Morocco. If they're going to trascender, if they're ever really going to do something special and get past the round of 16 into that quinto partido, and beyond, which we know is the goal for the Mexican national team. But for me, when I look at Diego Cocca, the red flags are everything else. One is the timing. I don't think I really understand the rush here, right? If you wait till the summer, you're certainly going to have better candidates, more candidates. The second is his resume, Herc. Outside of Atlas, and I'm not suggesting it's any small thing what he did at Atlas, but you got to look really long and really hard to find anything that's a sustained success. In fact, of all of his head coaching jobs, he's only had one, other than Atlas, where he's lasted more than 50 games. To me, I don't see a lot of success here. Even his Liga MX stops, other than Atlas. Santos, Xolos, he lost more games than he won. I'm just not convinced of Diego Cocca as the manager, and then on top of that, there's no international experience. And if I want to put my fan hat on her, then it's really underwhelming, right? Because this is not an ambitious hire. If I think of the names that the U.S. has been linked to, and maybe it's just links, Zinedine Zidane, Jose Mourinho. If you're a Mexico fan and you would hope for a home run swing, this is certainly not that. This is a very safe choice, it feels.
I don't know about safe choice, because there's nothing safe about the hiring process, and we can get into that in a bit, but you're looking at...
But it's not ambitious. This is not some superstar name. This is not a Bielsa.
This is why it's disappointing, because you had a Bielsa. You had somebody like Guillermo Almada, who's of that cloth, where it's offensive. It plays more to the Mexican player's traits. The Mexican player by DNA isn't a defensive player, isn't a gritty player, isn't a grind it out and look for results type of player. They're a free-flowing, technically sound player in the offensive third. And going back to what you said, you only have a little over 3 years into the World Cup. There are no World Cup qualifiers, so you're just playing friendlies. Time to really implement a style and go forward to change a whole DNA in what could be transformational process for the Mexican national team, that's going to take more than 3 years. So if you're trying to change the philosophy, that's not something that just changes overnight. The process for me is what gets me, and if I'm a fan, I'm disheartened by what I've seen.
Right. Like, I don't know if he's a bad coach or if he's going to do a bad job here, Herc. But there were better candidates, even of the realistic candidates. And that's regardless of what the criteria is. I don't know what the criteria is here, but if you wanted more Liga MX success, you could point to Guillermo Almada, you could point to Turco Mohamed. You want more international experience, you could point to Piojo. If you want more name, more renombre, more clout, you could have pointed to Bielsa. Like, no matter what the criteria was, Herc, Diego Cocca doesn't seem to be the number one guy in any category. So let's get to the
except
process.
For the championships recently.
2 championships. You're right. 2 championships with
what
Atlas.
What he did at Racing is crazy, by the way. Racing winning after 14 years. I mean, that's a league that's...
Okay, 6 years ago. 6 years ago now.
I'm just saying. But you're right. Like, if you look at the general numbers, there are titles there. Mm-hmm. A lot of that goes to Grupo Orlegui, by the way. There are titles there, but the overwhelming play, or I should say the play is overwhelmingly mediocre, despite the titles. That is great, and that's what it's about, but just in general.
Herc, as you mentioned, a lot of the criticism to this apparent appointment, we should say, is really coming down, I think, more to the process, right? And when we say process, I think we have to kind of explain it. It feels like more business as usual, kind of like the federation politics were really the driving force behind this decision and not the football, not the soccer. Are you buying that?
I am. There's one opposing group to everything that's been Mexican football over the last, I'd say, 2 decades, and that is Grupo Pachuca. That is Jesus Martinez. Guillermo Almada plays for one of Jesus Martinez's teams, which is Pachuca. He was a candidate. There's a reason that Jesus Martinez wasn't or isn't in this committee, the ownership committee of 5. It's because he knew what was coming. So, in this status quo of everything that is happening, what happens, okay? You have 5 owners. You have Xolos. Don't ask me why Grupo Caliente is there. You have Chivas, América, Grupo Orlegui, which is Santos and Atlas, and then Necaxa. In those 5, okay, they decided we need to restructure Mexican football. Rodrigo Arres de Parga, who's never been a successful director of anything in Mexican football, leaves Querétaro, which was a dumpster fire, and he's in charge of the hiring process, part of the hiring process where he goes and interviews the candidates. Rodrigo Arres de Parga, Querétaro, which is Grupo Caliente, Xolos and Querétaro, interviews what was supposed to be only Guillermo Almada and Miguel Herrera. Somewhere along the lines, we added the names Ignacio Ambriz, Turco Mohamed, Bielsa, and out of nowhere, Diego Cocca, who was already making $4 million a year with Tigres, comes into the process. Why is Diego Cocca relevant in this? Who is Diego Cocca's representation, his agent? Well, it happens to be Christian Bragarnik, and Bragarnik is a partner with Grupo Caliente. They own teams together. They own a team in Spain. They have business together. In this Grupo Caliente ownership, he owns those teams. He represents Diego Cocca, who happens to be with Grupo Caliente, who's part of the committee. And in doing this, putting their candidate out, it eliminates Grupo Pachuca. So this is all a political ploy. And also, by the way, Diego Cocca was employed by Orlegui at Santos and at Atlas. So this is all political. So in the process of putting a pawn in there and staking your territory, your land, you also eliminate an opposition, which is Grupo Martinez. This is more of the same, just insert a different name. Back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, this is Televisa and their monopoly. Now we're seeing a bit differently.
Yeah. So to boil it down, kind of the national team committee has effectively representation from 5 ownership groups, and 2 of those ownership groups, both Xolos and Santos, and of course Atlas and Santos under the same ownership group, have employed Diego Cocca at some point. So he had a lot of allies on the committee, and people are pointing to that and saying, perhaps rightfully so, that, politics played a role here, Herc. I think what's really disappointing from that perspective is clearly you have a lot of capable people in Mexican soccer in their own little silos. And yet when they come to the table to supposedly reform Mexican soccer, instead of giving us the best candidate, what we get is the candidate of the best politician. And that's not necessarily going to be the best national team coach. You understand what I'm saying? The owner who's the best politician puts his guy in as the national team manager. And that to me is just extremely worrisome. It doesn't feel like everyone's pulling in the same direction. And it doesn't feel like that statement we saw after the World Cup. Remember when we were told we're going to work together to make this thing work? This still very much feels like factions warring.
It's just sad because you want to see a change from Mexican football, but not only are they not changing, they're reverting to the same deck of cards when it comes to their options. At the sporting level, at the administrative level, at every single level in Mexican football, it's I scratch your back, you scratch mine, let's keep business going.
Real quick, before we move on, do you think he'll be successful?
I think he can be.
He's not a bad coach.
I think he can be successful.
He's not a bad coach.
No, I think he can be successful at a CONCACAF level.
Okay.
Right now, the version we saw of Canada and John Herdman wasn't the same version we saw in World Cup qualifying. Some of those players will be phased out because they are older. Let's see what the new crop comes in. Costa Rica, an enigma. Panama, still very young. We don't know what they're going to be like. And the U.S. men's national team, they don't have a head coach. And if the mantra, the style of play is going to be the same, but maybe the direction isn't there, and maybe these players have outgrown that, what's that going to look like? So Mexico's only, I guess, opposition, if you will, leading into a Gold Cup would be the U.S. men's national team. If they win, Diego Cocca is fine. He's going to be there, and he's going to be at whatever other tournament they go to, whether it's Copa America or any other made-up tournament that FIFA or CONCACAF wants to put in their way. And then it's the World Cup. At the World Cup, can he be successful? I don't know. I don't see this group being successful playing that way.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.